Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome to another edition of Coffee on the Couch. I'm here with my friend and previous boss, Paul Acapenti. So we're going to be talking about some theology questions and getting right into it. So,
well, Chris, thanks for having me out here, and hi everybody out there in the video world.
Yep. So, Paul, jumping right into it.
Okay.
What was it like for you growing up in your family, say like, faith-wise?
Sure, okay, so religious background, kind of thing like that, sure, yeah. I actually had a interesting sort of situation because my father was Catholic. He was brought up Catholic, his whole family, but my mom was Protestant, okay? Now, this is unusual because back in that particular time, back in 1950, whatever it was, 56, this was unusual that a Catholic would marry a Protestant, okay, and vice versa. Matter of fact, there was a lot of pushback from both families that they should not get married. But they went ahead and got married anyways, all right? And they sort of made a deal, though. There was kind of a lot of pressure, and that was, when they had kids, that the kids would be brought up Catholic. Okay, so I actually went to Catholic church because I had to. You don't have a choice with your kid. This is what you do. Your parents tell you you're going, you're going. So, and maybe once or twice a year we would go up to the Congregational church. Congregational church is one of the denominations within the Protestant church. So typically, like on Christmas Eve, we would go up to the Congo church for their service, but on Christmas morning we would go to the Catholic church for the Christmas thing. So we kind of did both, and as a kid, it's just what it was. So I didn't think it's strange or unusual because it's just what I was used to. For all I knew, everyone did this.
Right.
My mother believed in God and Jesus, and my dad believed in God and Jesus. So I'm like, okay, whatever, works for me.
Right.
So yeah.
All right. So that segues into the next question. What was your come to Jesus moment?
Well, that was a long time later. And it does relate back, obviously. So my views have changed drastically since my upbringing. When I was a teenager in high school, met this girl. And she invited me to church, and well, she's a girl, so whatever you got to do, you got to do.
Right.
I really didn't want to go to church. Matter of fact, I had kind of I didn't really rebel because I didn't have the option at that point yet.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, if I had had a choice, I wouldn't have been going because it was kind of boring, and it's like I got better things to do on Saturday night because a lot of Catholics actually go to church on Saturday night or Sunday morning. So.
Right.
So yeah, but anyways, went to church with the girl to impress her, and it was a Southern Baptist church. Okay? Now, Southern Baptists are very different than the liturgical, Catholic church. It's just very different.
Yeah.
And I really didn't know what to think about it. It was new. It was fresh. The people were very, very friendly. Not that they're unfriendly in the Catholic Church, but you walk into the Catholic Church, you go and you sit down, and like nobody talks until the end, kind of thing. Right. It's all business.
Yeah.
In this Southern Baptist church, you walked in, and my gosh, I think everybody in the place was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And just really friendly. It kind of like took me by surprise a little bit, but in a nice way.
Yeah.
The pastor actually read out of the Bible. More than just one sentence kind of thing, and went on to talk about that particular subject or explain that particular verse or whatever. So there was some context with it as well, and that was really the first time I kind of heard that sort of stuff. Again, back in the Catholic Church, everything's like a tradition.
Right.
Okay, now from the Gospel of Luke, and they read one thing and then they just move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Now, maybe not every Catholic church was like that, but the one I went to was like that when I was growing up.
I think that's how my dad was.
So, yeah, it was kind of sterile, generic, I guess would be two words I would kind of use to describe my Catholic upbringing. So that's just the beginning, right? So you're saying what was my sort of Jesus moment?
The second part to that question is, like, when did it really become real for you?
Okay, so well, it wasn't real yet. Now, I was so taken by these friendly people, and hearing the word of God really intrigued me, actually. I actually started going to that church just because I wanted to. Not just because the girl anymore. Of course, she was still there, so that was kind of like bonus, you know. But, and I was learning stuff, and I at one point toward the end of that summer, they had like this sort of outdoor tent revival thing, you know, music's playing and the preacher's preaching and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, he did the, you know, kind of typical altar call sort of thing, and I just really felt compelled to go up and say, yeah, you know, I want to follow Jesus.
All right.
I think it was more of an emotional response, you know, than anything else. So I really didn't understand what it meant to follow Jesus, but it seemed like the right thing to do at the time.
Right.
I ended up getting baptized. Now, as a teenager, as an adult, basically, my father was none too happy. He really felt betrayed.
Right.
I had somehow changed religions in his idea.
Yeah.
Okay. So he didn't talk to me for a while.
Ooh.
But eventually, you know, we figured all those things out and, you know, moved on.
Yeah.
I went off to college like a month later, with no one around to answer questions or to kind of encourage me in my new faith. And so, you know, I kind of held out for like a semester trying to be like the good person.
Yeah.
But, you know, there was lots of temptations. Some of my buddies were going out, and, you know, there's girls and drinking and stuff. And, you know, finally I just, you know, I was sort of tempted by a lot of that stuff, and I started to partake in some of that stuff, and I had serious guilt about it. And I also felt like a hypocrite, well, because I was a hypocrite.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So, and I really couldn't stand the thought of being a hypocrite. So I decided, well, I've got to make a decision one way or the other here. And in my tremendous wisdom of that age, 18 or however old that was, I decided, well, God's going to be around for a long time, so I can catch up with him later.
Yeah.
I'm going to go off and have a good time at college, and I'll kind of be better than my buddies, sort of as like a justification of what I was doing. But yeah, so that's how that went. So my idea at the time was, you know, college, but then I'll get back to God. Well, that didn't quite happen. It kind of ended up being like another 20 years of just sort of living for myself, but you know, being moral.
Yeah.
So eventually, through a lot of circumstances, most of them tragic, my wife being diagnosed with cancer, you know, when stuff like that happens, you start to really ask questions like, why?
Right.
You know, why is this way? And I'll make a long story very short. Being faced with those questions made me now take it seriously. And at that point, even though my wife passed, God was faithful through that in ways, like I said, it's a very, very lengthy explanation. But now I went from believing God existed to believing God was actually caring. So there's a big difference there.
There is.
You know, sort of a key point in that transition was in the hospital. My wife had been rushed in. The doctors came in and said, you know, this is probably the end. You know, she's not going to make it through the night. You better get the family here. You better get the priest and, you know, whoever, the holy people here, and take care of business. As I was waiting for them all to show up, because this is the wee hours of the morning, I went into the local chapel at the hospital and was praying as a good Catholic. So I'm saying the Lord's Prayer like a million times.
Right.
But at some point, when I was saying the Lord's Prayer, and in there's a verse that says, you know, thy will be done. And all of a sudden I stopped and I'm like, oh, what does that mean? I'm like, it means God's will be done, you know. So here I was all these years saying that, but I never really listened to what I was saying. Now I'm like, oh, this is really about God, not about like not Paul's will be done.
Right.
God's will be done.
Yeah.
And it just like really struck me. And so somehow in that moment, I gave God permission to do whatever he wanted to do. Not that he needs my permission, but it was a realization that God is really the one in charge, not me.
Right. And that's a hard place to be, but I mean...
To give God permission to take your wife and what you perceive as your dreams and your future away, that can be difficult. That was really the start of my Jesus moment. Like some people actually have like, oh yeah, on such and such a day, I came to Christ. Right. Well, that's not my experience. Right. There was lots of little things and some major things along a very lengthy path that brought me to the point of, wow, God's real. God cares. I'm a sinner. I need Jesus.
Yeah.
I need salvation. I need, you know.
And I think it's kind of a process that happens.
For me, it was, yeah.
Yeah. So some of the things you touched on, you know, about being a like not too bad, or you know, so that kind of segues perfect into this question, which is, what do you think on the idea that everyone is a good person?
Sure. Yeah. And I think for the most part, if you go up to someone and, you know, say, you know, do you think you're a good person? They're going to say, well, of course, yeah, you know. Of course, we can sit there and point to people and say, well, that person's better than that one, and that one's really bad, you know, and this one's better than this one, you know. So certainly there are better and worse people. And this is, I struggled with this myself, even as in my process of becoming a believer. My big issue was I really thought I was a good person because I was more moral than a lot of my friends. So even in college, when my buddies were drinking, well, I'm going to drink. I'm just not going to drink as much as they are. That makes me better than them. God's going to appreciate that. Okay, or at least that was my justification for it all.
Right. And, you know, that's, I was just talking to someone on the show not too long ago about that idea, about how, you know, like, what is the standard for a good person? If you're basing it on other people, 9 out of 10 times you'll find you're a better person.
Well, of course, because we want to make ourselves better, so we're always going to point at the people that are worse than us, right?
Right.
But, you know, I've heard it said, you know, okay, well, you're no Hitler, but you're no Jesus.
Right.
Well, where are you?
Right.
I'm somewhere in between. But where's the line?
Exactly.
You know, how do I know I'm good enough or close enough to Jesus to be good enough? Well, actually, the Bible says no one is good enough. You actually have to be perfect. If you're not perfect, like Jesus, then you're in trouble. Now, a lot of people get upset about this. They're like, "Oh my gosh, you know, so you make one mistake and you're off to hell." Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Now I know that sounds very offensive. Okay. But step back and think about this logically. If you break only one law, let's say you rob one bank.
Right. Yeah.
You're going to jail.
Yeah.
Right? But I didn't murder anybody when I robbed the bank. You know, I didn't, you know, all these other crimes you could have done. I didn't do those. But you did one crime. You're guilty.
Yeah. You still broke the law.
You broke the law. You're guilty. There's punishment for guilt.
Yep.
Away you go.
Yep. Yeah, and then you got people that are like, well, God will forgive me. Well, he you know, in the sense of like, if you actually robbed the bank.
Right,
you know,
God's all loving, so he'll forgive me.
Yeah, but...
Well, are you counting on that?
Right, yeah, because it's like...
and why would you believe such a thing?
Yeah, it perplexes me too, because it's like, okay, God may forgive you in a, like, hypothetical, but you're still going to jail, you know.
Right.
So.
Okay. But I think that's a skewed understanding of that God is love.
I think so too.
Okay. So a lot of times people say God is love, which He is, but God is not just love.
Right.
He's just and love. He's perfect. He's perfect in every way. So there's justice, and He's perfect in justice. Right?
Yeah. So that's a good explanation for that. So the other one, moving more into business questions for this segment of the interview. Sure. Where did your love for working with wood and creating things out of nothing develop?
Well, I don't create them out of nothing. Only God does that, by the way. If I could, that'd be a really cool trick, and I'd be a very wealthy man right now.
True.
It's really, I am a byproduct of my parents. I have to admit. Okay?
Yeah.
You know, as a kid, you're like, you don't want to be like your parents. But then you end up being exactly like your parents.
Yeah.
And so I am exactly like both of my parents. My father, all growing up, was always in the workshop, tinkering stuff in the wintertime. And in the summertime, he was out building stuff. He built barns, he built houses, he built gazebos, I mean, there's stuff all over Princeton that he built.
Oh, wow.
You know, and he was just... And he never even graduated high school. He just somehow intuitively knew how to do this stuff and loved doing it. So I just hung out with him all the time. I mean, as a kid, I was down in the workshop probably at age maybe 7 or 8, working on some power tools. Not all of them, but some. You know, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't know if that's just because, wow, my dad was doing it, so that's cool, so I did it. I think there was certainly part of that.
Right.
But that's not all of it. Somehow I am hardwired that I enjoy putting my hands to something. And even as a kid, my parents recognized very, very early, I mean, I'm talking when I was like 4 or 5 years old, maybe even earlier, that I could sketch and draw things well beyond anybody my age. I've always, even in my mind, I think in pictures. And I think three-dimensionally.
Okay.
So it used to be, you know, on the back of a box of cereal, there used to be this picture of something, and you could, they would say, you know, draw this scene and send it in, you know, and, you know, we'll send you back this little certificate of you're this little artist or something, whatever. It was some kind of little thing for kids.
Yeah.
But what I would do was I would take that scene, but I would draw it from a different viewpoint. Now, how many kids do that?
Yeah, really.
Kids just copy what's there, you know, when you're like 5 years old.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty...
So again, my mind just worked very differently. And so those things all just kind of work together. There's no explanation to that other than it's hardwired in.
Yeah.
You know? It's not like my parents, you know, typed in, oh, we want a son, then click, 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 beep, enter. We want a kid who's hardwired this way. You don't have that choice. It's just, it happens.
You know?
You can ask yourself, how does that happen? I think I know the answer.
Yeah. You know, I think that it's a funny thing, like, just getting into the idea of how we're made. Like, we all have different things that we're good at and different traits and things that are hardwired into us. And I think that's a good example of that.
Sometimes we have to discover them.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't know that they're there until we, you know, are sometimes even forced into trying something, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I'm really good at this. You know?
Like, for example, I'm a lot better at ideas and concepts than I am at memorization, which does not play too well in school.
Right.
So
now you remember our buddy Tim Nault.
Yep.
The guy could read a paragraph and, you know, he knew it. He could memorize. He could say it right back to you. Like, well, he really peed me off when he could do stuff like that. It's like, man, that's hard work for me.
Right? Oh yeah. Oh, good old Tim. So another question in the business sector of questions: what made you decide to go into the self-employed sector? And in what ways have you honed your skills to get to where you are now? So,
all right. Well, like I said, I've always loved working with my hands, and owning my own house certainly was a big part of that because I bought a fixer-upper, and I spent a lot of time and effort and what they call elbow grease renovating the entire house, room by room, putting on an addition, just everything. So my house was actually sort of like my education.
Oh.
Okay. And certainly I had, my dad helped me and showed me some different things too as well. But it was just because it was something that interested me anyways, woodworking in general, not just building houses, but like fine woodworking, cabinet making, those kinds of things. I would read magazines, I would read articles, I would get books. It was just something that interested me. So I spent a lot of time focusing on those things and then doing stuff. How did I get into the self-employed business within that? Well, for most of my professional career, for 20 years, I was a custom trade show exhibit designer. So again, coming up with ideas, drawing and stuff like that. But it was in small companies, so a lot of times I would come up with the idea, then I would run out to the shop and I would actually help build it.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so it was just part of the process.
Yeah.
Eventually, as the industry turned down after 9/11, there was a big downturn in the economy, and that particular business really got hurt. And I found myself unemployed, and then eventually, through my walk of becoming a Christian, getting introduced to Mission E4,
right,
and really changing a lot of my priorities in life, I actually sold my house and went, on to volunteer for Mission E4 full time. Doing those kinds of things, managing the facility, so building things, designing things, gardening. By the way, my mother was a great gardener. So when I said my father was the builder, my mother was the gardener, and that's me. So,
all right.
But even though I'm a full-time volunteer, that also means I need a job. But I didn't want to be tied down to having a regular job because I'm a full-time volunteer. So basically I went into the self-employed business of fitting in a job here and there when I could. So,
yeah, and that's a valid point. I mean, there are people, but who really likes to work a job where you're not your own boss?
Well, there certainly are advantages.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to do all the stuff bosses have to do.
It's
you don't have
true.
to take care of the, the taxes and
That's true.
bill, all the stuff that running a business is part of. You get to just show up and get a paycheck for it.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So the last question for this section, which, by the way, this will be a 4-part interview, so stay tuned for the rest of them. We're going to get into the last question for this part. Is has there ever been a point where, in an effort to cut corners for financial gain or otherwise, that you did something intentionally wrong?
Okay, so it's an integrity question,
Exactly.
Well, of course, because I haven't always been a person of integrity.
Right.
I certainly was brought up with the idea of hard work and honesty. My father was in human standards, a very good person. Worked extremely hard. I mean, there were times where he worked 7 days a week, not just like once in a while. I'm talking like for years. My mother ran a business, so all those things, that was just part of it. Growing up, okay, you have chores.
Right.
You're doing them, right. and understanding that, you're getting 35 cents allowance. That was my allowance to take care of all the animals and all the house chores and everything else. But it was bred into me that, this is how it is. But like everybody else, there were times where you cut corners.
Right.
Maybe not in the obvious ways. So before I became a believer and understood how important that is, I might show up to work a little bit late, not exactly on time.
Right.
Okay. Or maybe, you know, for lunch hour, instead of an hour or whatever it was, you know, maybe you'd stretch it 5 or 10 minutes. Because, hey, everybody else does.
Right.
You know, so you're just going along with the crowd. You know, it's no big deal. Come on, you know. So, yeah. You know, you take the occasional pen or notebook home from work. You know, hey, everybody does. I mean, you know, the boss, realizes that that's happening. So it's not like, you know, you're stealing.
Yeah.
Of course you are stealing.
Yeah, of course. But it's not like a big deal, you know.
Well, right.
So
there was lots of, you know, I was the typical American person. I'm doing what everybody else is doing. And so there are a lot of things that we don't consider immoral or wrong or sin because we justify them as being right because everybody does it.
Nice.
So, but once I became a follower of Christ, I now had to do a different standard.
Right.
I'm not following what other people do.
But it's a game changer.
It's a game changer. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean I don't make mistakes still.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that I'm not tempted to do things.
Right.
So that's the internal battle between the flesh and the spirit that the Bible talks about. That wars in each of us.
That it does.
Yeah.
Well.
However, I will add this. You know, in Proverbs, and that's just a book of...
Like a lot of wisdom?
Yeah, wisdom, right. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. It's a wisdom book. There's just a lot of wisdom. You know, if you are a person of integrity and you work hard, you benefit from that. People notice and they trust you now. So, you know, who are you going to give the promotion to? You got two candidates that are equal in talent. One guy, you know, is honest as can be. I mean, you know, no matter what you do, you know, hey, I'll pay you under the table. No, it's okay.
Right.
You know, let's do it the right way. You know, somebody who's willing to actually not get more money.
Yeah. And that's a tough thing. Yeah.
Who are you going to trust?
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, I had this situation, you know, where I was actually offered a job because I was a person of integrity.
Wow.
You know, I made sure I was at work on time. I made sure I only took exactly my breaks. I didn't stretch them. And when I was working, I was actually working. I wasn't goofing off, talking to people, things like that. So, so the boss noticed. Yeah. There you go.
There you go.
So there's benefits.
There is. So, all right, guys. So that'll do it for this section. But stay tuned for the other parts. And, yeah, hope you enjoyed this and the future ones to come.